Hello and welcome to Kuma English Listening Hub. Today, we are diving into a very British institution that you can now find in cities all over the world, but which feels particularly at home on a British high street, the charity shop. Not just as somewhere to pick up a cheap jumper, but as a treasure trove of hidden stories, social change, and subtle cultural codes. Now, before you think, oh, it is just secondhand clothes on squeaky hangers, stay with me. The humble charity shop, often squeezed between a bakery and a phone repair place, reveals a surprising amount about how a society sees value, waste, generosity, and even death. It is all there, quietly sitting on those overcrowded rails. Let us begin with the basics. In the United Kingdom, charity shops are typically run by registered charities such as Oxfam, Cancer Research UK, or the British Heart Foundation. They rely heavily on volunteers and on donated goods. On the surface, the model is straightforward. People give away unwanted items, the shop sells them at a modest price, and the proceeds fund medical research, humanitarian work, or local social projects. However, the reality is far more intricate. Charity shops sit at the intersection of economics, ethics, culture, and identity. They are, in a sense, micro-museums of everyday life, but instead of carefully curated glass cases, you have slightly wobbly shelves and a strange abundance of ceramic cats. If you have ever wandered into a British charity shop on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, you will know the atmosphere. The doorbell jingles. Somewhere, a CD from the early 2000s is playing a song that was never quite a hit but is oddly nostalgic. You are greeted by a volunteer who might say, "You all right there, love?" in that warm, slightly distracted way that suggests they are both delighted to see you and also properly focused on color-coding a rail of cardigans. At first glance, the items may look like random clutter. Yet, this is not chaos. It is a particular kind of order, shaped by the local area. Walk into a charity shop in a leafy, affluent London suburb, and you may find designer coats, barely worn, and hardback novels from last year's bestseller lists. Pop into a shop in a small coastal town, and you are more likely to find walking sticks, puzzle books, and framed pictures of ships. The shop reflects its donors as much as its customers. One of the most striking realities hiding in plain sight is that charity shops are often the final resting place of someone's life possessions. When a person dies, relatives sort through their belongings. Some things are kept for sentimental value. Some are sold. Much, however, is donated. This is why you occasionally find a set of perfectly preserved teacups, a collection of gardening tools, or a wardrobe full of high-quality suits, all in one go. If you browse the shelves with that in mind, the shop takes on a different aura. You are no longer just buying a coat. You are, in a quiet way, stepping into somebody else's story. That slightly old-fashioned blazer with a discreet label from a tailor in Savile Row was once worn by someone who took pride in dressing properly for work. The recipe book stained with splashes of oil and flour hint at a person who cooked from scratch, perhaps for a big family every Sunday. Of course, we rarely know the details. The shop workers are often careful not to say too much, partly out of respect, partly because even they do not fully know. A box simply arrived one morning, handed over with a slightly tired, "Mum would have wanted these to go to a good cause." And that is that. The life behind the objects dissolves into anonymity, but traces remain. This anonymity creates a curious freedom for the buyer. In a conventional shop, the object arrives brand new, with a fixed identity shaped by marketing. A handbag is not just a handbag. It is a lifestyle choice, delivered by a glossy advertisement full of people who look mysteriously unbothered by the British weather. In a charity shop, the marketing has long since fallen away. You are dealing with the thing itself, secondhand, dispossessed of its original story, waiting for a new one. This is one reason why charity shops have become popular with people who are keen on expressing individuality through clothing. Rather than walking into a fast fashion chain and picking up exactly what thousands of others are already wearing, a charity shop shopper is hoping to unearth a one-off. And when they do, the experience is not merely practical, it is almost archaeological. You push aside 3 or 4 rather tired jumpers, and suddenly there it is. A proper wool coat in impeccable condition, made in Britain decades ago for the price of a takeaway pizza. You check the lining. Spot on. You try it on in a mirror that slightly distorts your shape and is held together with tape. It fits. No algorithm recommended it. No trend forecast predicted it. You just found it. That sense of discovery is crucial. It transforms shopping from a mildly tedious chore into a treasure hunt. It is no coincidence that people talk about charity shop finds or bargains with a level of enthusiasm usually reserved for dramatic life events. Someone will say, "You paid how much for that jacket? Blimey, mate, that is brilliant." As though you have personally outwitted the global fashion industry. However, behind the lighthearted banter, there is a serious question. How did we get to the point where there is so much stuff that perfectly good clothing, furniture, and gadgets end up as donations, sometimes with the original tags still attached? The rise of charity shops is closely linked to the rise of consumer culture and, more recently, fast fashion. In many high streets, you can stand outside a charity shop and see a budget fashion chain on one side and a luxury boutique on the other. People buy more clothes than ever before, wear them fewer times, and discard them more quickly. Charity shops have become one of the main safety valves for this flow of goods. They absorb the excess. Some items are sold on the shop floor. Others, if they are especially valuable or particularly niche, might be sent to specialist online platforms. Items that are damaged or unsuitable may be sold in bulk for textile recycling. Yet, there is a limit. Staff and volunteers regularly face the less glamorous side of generosity. Bin bags of stained t-shirts, broken electronics, or dubious ornaments that are frankly more landfill than legacy. It is not uncommon to see a polite sign saying, "Please don't leave donations outside the shop overnight," often because people have been abandoning bags that are essentially rubbish. This reveals an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes donating to charity is less about altruism and more about outsourcing guilt. Instead of confronting our overconsumption, we relieve ourselves by passing the problem to someone else and feeling virtuous in the process. "I have had a proper clear-out," we say, as if decluttering had become a moral achievement. To be fair, the picture is not entirely bleak. For many people, donating genuinely is an act of generosity. They could have sold that nearly new coffee machine online, but they choose instead to give it away to support a cause they care about. Grandparents encourage their grandchildren to donate toys they have outgrown, teaching them that possessions can have a life beyond their first owner. Nevertheless, charity shops are caught in a delicate balancing act. They need a constant flow of stock, but not all stock is equal. High-quality items fly off the shelves. Cheap, poorly made goods are much harder to shift. Over time, this creates a quiet hierarchy of value that mirrors society's broader inequalities. In more affluent areas, the shops are filled with items that might be marketed as vintage or retro elsewhere. In poorer neighborhoods, the goods are often more worn, more practical, and more limited. The very people who rely most on charity shops for affordable clothing may simultaneously be least likely to find that one extraordinary designer coat hidden in the rail. And yet, within this uneven landscape, charity shops can also act as points of dignity. For someone who is skint or between jobs, being able to buy decent clothes cheaply can make a huge difference, not just to their comfort, but to their confidence. A suit from a charity shop might be worn to a job interview that changes the course of a person's life. A warm winter coat picked up for a few pounds can be the difference between coping and being utterly knackered by the cold. Beyond the economics, there is the social role. Charity shops are often staffed by a mix of retirees, students, people with disabilities, and those re-entering the workforce after illness or unemployment. For volunteers, the shop can provide routine, community, and a sense of purpose. It is somewhere to go, somewhere to be needed, somewhere to chat about the weather and the price of milk while sorting through a box of donated DVDs from 3 technological eras ago. These conversations, though seemingly trivial, help stitch together local communities. The volunteer behind the till may know who has just moved into the area, who is going through a tough time, and who always comes in on a Thursday for a browse and a natter. The charity shop becomes, unofficially, a tiny social hub. This community function was thrown into sharp relief during the COVID-19 pandemic, when charity shops across the UK and many other countries had to shut their doors. For some volunteers, especially older ones living alone, the loss of that weekly routine and contact was devastating. When the shops finally reopened, often with hand sanitizer at the door and slightly bewildered queues outside, there was a palpable sense of relief. Not just because people could finally donate the mountain of lockdown clutter sitting in their spare rooms, but because the familiar ritual of popping into the local charity shop signaled a tentative return to normal life. On a cultural level, charity shops also challenge our assumptions about status and taste. Traditionally, in Britain at least, class has often been displayed through what you wear and where you shop. Buying secondhand was once associated with necessity and, by extension, with lower social status. Now it is increasingly associated with environmental awareness, individuality, and even a certain kind of cool. Young people, in particular, may treat charity shops as hunting grounds for items that look ironically retro or authentically old school. A chunky jumper from the 1980 seconds, once dismissed as unfashionable, is suddenly quite sought after. A floral shirt that your uncle would have worn on holiday in Spain becomes part of a carefully curated outfit posted on social media. This raises intriguing questions about authenticity. When someone deliberately dresses in secondhand clothes to signal that they are not obsessed with brands, they are still, in a way, performing an identity. However relaxed or effortless the look appears, it is rarely accidental. Charity shops, then, do not simply offer cheap alternatives to mainstream fashion. They provide raw materials for identity construction. All of this might sound terribly theoretical, but you only need to spend half an hour people watching in a busy charity shop to see it play out in real time. Over there, a teenager is trying on a velvet blazer, laughing with their friend about looking like a character from a 1990 seconds British sitcom. Nearby, a parent is hunting for school uniforms in the right size. At the till, an older gentleman is donating a stack of classical music CDs, muttering that nobody listens to proper music anymore, as he hands them over. And in the middle of all this, the charity itself quietly continues its work. The money raised from those slightly scuffed shoes, or that jigsaw puzzle with one piece mysteriously missing, might fund a hospice bed, a medical trial, or a literacy project. Each individual purchase is minor. The cumulative effect, however, is substantial. From an environmental perspective, charity shops sit at an interesting crossroads. On the one hand, they absolutely form part of the circular economy, keeping items in use for longer and reducing waste. On the other hand, they can unintentionally enable overconsumption by making it easier to get rid of things. If we know that we can donate clothes when we are bored of them, we may feel less compunction about buying too many in the first place. So, where does this leave us as language learners, as consumers, and perhaps as future visitors to Britain, wandering down a drizzle-soaked high street in search of a decent cup of tea and a bargain paperback? It might be helpful to think of charity shops as mirrors. They reflect back not just our material culture, but our values and contradictions. We like to see ourselves as generous, but we also like convenience. We talk about sustainability, yet we sometimes treat objects as disposable. We are sentimentally attached to certain items, but we are also quite ruthless when storage space runs out. Next time you step into a charity shop, whether in the UK or elsewhere, you could turn it into a kind of informal sociological field trip. Look at the book section. Which authors keep turning up? Look at the clothes. Which brands survive? Which fabrics age well? Which styles are clearly of another decade? Look at the homeware. How many gadgets seem to have been used once and then abandoned? Listen, too, to the language around you. The British way of talking about money, value, and class is often carefully coded. A customer picking up a dress might say, "I cannot really justify that at full price, but for a tenner, why not?" Another might murmur, "It would be rude not to." as though buying the item were an act of politeness rather than desire. A volunteer might reassure someone by saying, "Pay what you feel comfortable with," subtly framing the transaction as a moral decision, not just a financial one. In this small, cluttered, slightly musty environment, big questions about ethics, identity, and community are being negotiated through tiny interactions. That, in itself, is rather extraordinary. As we wrap up, let us pull a few threads together, like someone folding clothes at the end of the day. Charity shops show us that objects have longer lives than we think, that stories can be passed on without words, and that value is not just about price tags. They also remind us that generosity is messy, that good intentions can mingle with convenience, and that our attempts to do the right thing are often imperfect but still worthwhile. For you, as a C2 learner of English, charity shops also offer a fabulous real-world listening laboratory. If you ever find yourself in one, you can eavesdrop politely on a wealth of accents, idioms, and understated British humor. You will hear phrases such as, "Oh, that is a bit of a bargain," "You cannot go wrong at that price," or "I am not being funny, but that is stunning," each carrying subtle cultural nuances. So, the next time you pass a charity shop, do not just see a slightly chaotic window display. See a living archive of everyday life. A place where someone's former favorite jumper is waiting to become yours. A quiet engine funding everything from cancer research to animal rescue. A stage where the dramas of class, taste, and identity are played out through the medium of secondhand crockery. And if you do find something brilliant, something that feels as though it was made for you, even though it belonged to someone else first, well, that is the magic of the whole enterprise. You walk out, carry your bag in hand, a few pounds lighter, the charity a few pounds better off, and the object ready for its next chapter. Everyone wins. Sorted. Thanks for listening to Kuma English Listening Hub. If your brain is not completely knackered after all that, you might want to listen again, this time paying attention to vocabulary, tone, and the subtle ways people talk about money and value in British culture. Until next time, take care, and cheers for listening.